So we are on our third installment on the time of the Gentiles is over, which I think this is one of the most important prophecy studies for the time that we live in, because we are getting close to the end from a biblical perspective, and we are demonstrating social moray changes that have occurred since 1967, when the Jews recaptured Jerusalem. If we look in the previous study, we had shown the prophecy where Jesus says Jerusalem will be controlled by the Gentiles till the time of the Gentiles is fulfilled. So basically, when you see a verse like that, you're going to say, what does that mean? Well, number one, the first answer to that is the obvious, is it means what it says, right? Then the not so obvious thing is, how do you apply what it says? Okay, so if the time of the Gentiles was over, so we know that it ended in 1967, then what would constitute a change from a Christian perspective? So even if you're a Christian that deep down doesn't believe in God, or if you're someone that don't believe in God that sees this, or if you're questioning the prophecies or what have you, it's 100% fact that what's recorded in Luke, the prophecy, is 100% true. You know, it actually did happen in 67. The world was Christian, and the world has changed. And so these are the things that now I don't think people are going to be that interested in the study, because after all, we're Gentiles and we're talking about the time of Gentiles being over. I hope that this study eventually will bear some fruit in the nation of Israel, and that's the reason for this channel, is to have it as a witnessing tool when we get there. Okay, so our next social moray issue that that we left off talking about is how has people's attitudes, how has people's love for children changed since 1967?
Well, clearly, before, children were a blessing, children were an asset, children were, the meaning in your life. Like, you want to, even as a child, you want to grow up one day and have children. And children are what make you happy, and then the children grow up, and when you get old, then you have grandchildren, and all of these things is what actually, gives your life meaning. And then since then, once both parents are working and they have to pay for childcare, and they have to deal with all of everything's a problem. Kids are now a burden, and they're not a source of happiness. They're a nuisance. And it's like, okay, why did you have kids? Well, then now you see people aren't having kids. There's a shortage of babies.
Right. Okay, it's clear that people don't love children as much as they used to, right?
Right.
Okay, so just to piggyback on the points that you made, just to clarify them in a slightly different way, but the same logic, is that if you go back before 67, the most important thing in a person's life was having children and their children themselves. Their children was their number one priority. There was one of the things that actually drew me to Ethiopia was in the 80s. I saw the sad story during the famine of this woman that had these two children, and then you see that she died because they only had a little bit of food, and then she gave what food was left to her kids and then died of starvation, right? And there was the immigrant woman in the 30s during the Depression was a famous depiction of something not quite that extreme, but similar theme in America, is that the mothers all loved the children, and all women grew up loving babies, and it was almost like a magical thing. And then when we had the no-fault divorce, the thing that you mentioned about the burden, there was another factor that happened with the burden that first happened with men, is that society would get divorced. Women would have children because they'd say, okay, we're going to give you 30% of your income to your and child support, and then we're going to give alimony to your wife. And they would not take into account that someone has to pay taxes. So say you had 2 kids, right? You got divorced, and say you made $100,000 a year, just to use easy math. It costs you about $30,000-$40,000 a year in taxes, like 30 in income, and then maybe 10 in other taxes. And then you pay $30,000 in child support, you pay $20,000 in alimony. That leaves you $20,000 a year, right? So then like with myself, one of the reasons I hadn't got married is because I don't want to go through that. You know what I'm saying? And then also then the kids, don't have parents, and then the parents fight over the kids. So then it becomes a position where you look at the kids and you're looking, oh my gosh, this is going to cost me a lot of money. So this is what happened in the 90s. Now then, when you go today, where all the girls are prioritizing their career and think that it's degrading to be at home, then now, I don't know if this is true or not exactly, but I've heard some people pay $16,000 a year in childcare. So a lot of girls are like, this is going to hurt my career. And where women are trying to behave more like men, they don't want to be burdened with children because they're not seeing the family as the meaning to life. They're seeing their career as it. So when you're working, then you don't have time for kids as much. And so if you look at, like, since the time of the Gentiles had ended, people are not as dedicated to their kids. They're not spending life to the kids. And because we actually made children a financial burden, they become it. And also, people can't afford the kids because the cost of daycare, healthcare, and everything has risen. And also people, when you take away the joy in the relationships, I think kids create more joy. Like if you and your wife are in love with each other, then the child that you have is like a symbol of this union and a symbol of this love.
Yep.
Well, if you're not looking for love and happiness in a relationship, then the symbol means nothing.
Right.
Okay. So then it's basically a byproduct of being together now, and it's almost like an accident, if you will. Mm-hmm. And then, like you mentioned too, is then with raising kids, always talking about, you don't want to do this, you don't want to trust authority, you don't want to talk to strangers, you don't blah 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 blah. There's nothing that's exciting about constantly talking about problems and things to avoid. And if this is how we learn to raise kids, it's not as much fun.
Not fun, right?
Right.
We're not playing kickball.
It was a lot more fun when you tell your kid that you love them more than life itself, that they can be anything they want, that they're the greatest thing that's happened in your life. Like mm-hmm. when you had like a positive exchange, mm-hmm. this actually made the family more enjoyable. And I think the reason why a lot of younger people today can't really communicate, they can't share personal experiences, they can't talk about their life, is because they didn't get that positive reinforcement in the home that teaches that your feelings and your days and your life actually are valuable.
Right.
And yeah. I think they're so used to just talking about problems that nobody feels comfortable talking about something that doesn't give you money, that doesn't solve a problem, that isn't an issue. I think mm-hmm. we all in a society, we desperately need to just talk to each other without an agenda.
Yeah.
And I think that this sort of thing has had a negative impact on people's relations with kids. And then by teaching all the kids to be afraid of adults, also has caused other adults to not enjoy kids as much. Like when I was a little kid, all the adults would come pinch my cheeks, tell me how cute I am. They would talk to me. They'd give me, if it was an old man, he'd give me fatherly advice. If it was a woman, she would treat me like a kid. Nowadays, we have social rules that as an adult, you're not allowed, it's not correct to talk to a child. Mm-hmm. Okay? So then, because of fear. And so also, I think when people liked your children, mm-hmm. it was more fun to be out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas now, you want to make sure that you don't talk to a children because they're going to think you're an abductor or a molester. So
Yeah.
you
Well, it's funny. It's like when I had kids, even when I was younger, people would come up. A baby was an excuse to approach somebody. Now, it's a dog.
It's
If
a
you
dog.
have the dog. The dog is the icebreaker.
and people can be nice to dogs. People can be happy with dogs.
And you're allowed to talk to strangers if they have a dog. But it used to be that you could talk to strangers if they had a baby.
Right, and then people used to totally respect people taking care of their babies. People, like the baby was like one of the most important things in the world before 1967.
Yeah.
And so I think that people are seeing children as financial burdens. They're not allowed to talk to children unless it's their own, and they're also viewing career to be a more meaningful existence than family. And then I think they're being brainwashed by society, not by a person, but society is brainwashing women into feeling that the whole child rearing process is degrading to women. I mean, this might not be true of the millennials and up. This last thing I think is kind of like a Gen Z thing, but so if you have any degree of objectivity at all, then you can see that our whole attitude about children has totally changed since 1967.
Right.
Okay, so now let's move along to okay, how has society's attitude on pornography changed since 1967?
I think in the past it was, not just taboo, but considered, bad, low class, not something that you would ever want, women or children to be exposed to. And from what I see now, people make reference to it like it's a norm. Like if you were somebody that, a porn star in the past, then you were ostracized to that part of society. Now you're an adult actor or something, like it's acceptable that that's your job.
Yeah, like there were some actors that started off as porn stars and it was a taboo thing. It would have ruined their career. They should keep it a secret. Now like you actually have the opposite. I think Bella Thorne went into pornography after she was an established.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I see.
I mean, I don't watch it,
Right.
so I don't know for sure, but I think I read that,
Yeah.
But I think that in the past it ties into the last question. You wanted the kids to be pure and innocent and
Right.
people wore modest clothing, right?
Right.
And then what happened is that the first, somewhere near 67 is when Hugh Hefner became popular. I guess it was a little before that, but it was somewhere, it's not too far from that
Right.
time. But then you had the pornographic magazines.
Right.
And then in the 70s, you started to get the pornographic movies. And then 70s, 80s, and 90s, it was pretty much confined to those things. And then you had guys. So in the Christian age, if you were a guy, your ultimate girl was a pure, discreet, chaste, keeper at home, a girl that loved babies, a girl that could cook and clean, a girl that had good character. And then in the 90s, guys said they wanted a porn star, right? And then now, with the internet, you have this thing called OnlyFans site, where you literally millions of girls do porn
For money.
on the internet. Yeah, like there's stories of these teachers that didn't make enough money, so they started OnlyFans. They became millionaire on OnlyFans, right? And so then now there's big money in porn. It's socially acceptable. It's not stigmatized, and then people are dressing like porn stars, behaving like porn stars. And there's this woman my age I seen in the news that got sick. That's in the mainstream news. that used to be a porn star. So it's
Okay.
like they're now, it's now normalized. It's talked about. It's acceptable. Whereas before 67, no guy would, like you wouldn't marry a girl that's a porn star.
Right.
Before 67, doing it would not help you.
Right. Yeah, to make me more popular now.
Yes, and it's also true. Like purity is gone, so it's not like you can go back to the past either. It's there's a fine line between living an immoral lifestyle and being a porn star. It's the difference between it and reality is less than it was back then too. Just like on our previous topic with children, as I made this point, I want to actually write this in a book, is that say a girl wants to have a baby, right? If this was 1967, then the girl over here has a baby, the girl over there has a baby, the girl over there has a baby, and then they also got together as women, and their kids got together,
Yeah.
and then their kids were friends, and they were friends, and then they all had support. And
Right.
so then, if this woman wanted to go for the weekend with her husband, she could leave her kids with her best friend over here. There's like a whole. So say a girl is 20 today wants to have a baby. First of all, they're told they shouldn't have kids till they're 30. They say you're just a child. They think that you're a child at 20. They tell them they need to get a career, and then if they did choose to do it, they'd be sitting in the home without any support because all the other girls are working. Well, the same thing has happened with porn. Is that you started with the immodesty, right? And then you have fornication. Then you have nobody waits for marriage for sex anymore. There actually is a lesser difference between the real world and porn than there was in the 60s. So it's not like. So now when you say it's wrong, it's because it's immodest, because it's immoral, because it could cause diseases. Whereas if you go back in the 60s, you're robbing the kid of their innocence. You're robbing them of the purity. You're cheapening the relationship. So then the actual things that condemn it, the emotions of why it was bad, have changed as the attitudes of how the dating world works has changed, and then now there's prostitution has become common, wearing bikinis on photos become common, OnlyFans has become common, so and pornography has become common, and there's a lot of people that do both, porn and prostitution in the world because they're with OnlyFans, right? So it's basically become a mess. So the whole standard, so it went from something that was taboo to something that is
Legitimized.
right, and then it gets legitimized by the lowering of the value. Just like we're saying, alternative relationships become normal because the actual relationship structure itself has changed. So I think when you look at the destruction of society from the Christian perspective, you don't just have the immoral thing. You have a degree of society crumbling to catch up to the immoral thing. So then the thing that's immoral, doesn't look as, that bad, because we did all the other things. So I think the immodest I think fornication without marriage and immodest clothing led to, and divorce led to what we have now. And it's not, and I think too, like in a lot of Christian circles, you look at it and you say it's bad, then you got to say, okay, why is it bad? Because if these people aren't harming other people, then what's wrong with it? And some of the things that are wrong in the Bible, they're not necessarily bad because of the act itself. What makes them so bad is what it does to society. There's social values in society. So because we have this particular system, it now is taken over a society of love, commitment, adoration, and closeness. That's why it's wrong. So I think if you looked at it on an individual level, you can't see the effect of it until you look at it on a generational and social level. In my personal opinion, it's more bad from a social level than it is on an individual, level.
Yeah.
And because when you're looking at things spiritually, you're looking at it from eternal. Okay. Okay, how has people's attitudes on greed changed since 1967? And I'll give you a hint. Our current president is Donald J. Trump.
Yeah. Well, that's a funny thing. So, just on a side note on that one, when they were demonstrating a list of enterprises that he had that failed, he had this board game, and the motto of the board game is it's not about who wins or loses, it's about who wins. But backing up, like, in my childhood even, it was considered wrong to be too competitive, to be too selfish, to be too greedy. Like, if you're greedy, you're not a good person. Like, this is a character flaw. Whereas now it feels like, you deserve this. You need to get this for yourself. If you have more than them, then you are in the lead. The better you can do at satisfying your greed, not that you can satisfy it, but the better you can do at it, the more successful you are. Success is not about whether you have a happy family, whether people love you, or whether you have a secure, social group. It's about what did you get.
Yeah, I think the Beatles song "Can't Buy Me Love" was somewhere as close to 1967. Like, if you think of that song, I don't care that much about money.
Money can't buy
Ironically,
love.
the guy singing it is now worth, I think, $1.5 billion. But he wasn't at the time that he sang it, right?
Right.
But I think people had more feelings for other people. So if say Ben here was sleeping in a tent and I'm in a mansion, we would have shame for that.
Right.
It'd be like, why would you not help?
How can you do this?
Right. Yeah. How could you not help him? And then I think people, when you had more respect for authority, you would respect, like, a teacher or a cop or someone making a sacrifice for the good of the community. And there was, I think in the 60s, I think it was started by the Kennedys, the Peace Corps. I'm not sure, but a lot of people, would join the Peace Corps, which you still have a little bit of it today, but you don't have as much of it as you did before. But in general, it was widely taught to not make money to be the most valuable thing. That if you did, that it was a form of shallowness.
Right.
And we had this famous poem that was written in the 1800s. Richard Cory.
Oh yeah.
That was based on trying to teach people.
Yeah.
Or even the Scrooge on the Christmas stories.
Yeah.
And no one ever actually viewed the person that was the most greedy to be something that's admired.
Right.
So, like with Trump as president, he's always created an image of access and indulgence, which the Bible condemns. So you got to wonder, why would the Christians think this is their best leader, right? So then he doesn't pay his taxes. He doesn't want his taxes to go. Then when you find out that he found loopholes for taxes, he says, this is because I'm smart. And then the Christians are like, yeah, we should have gold toilet seats too, and we should have 20,000 penthouse in New York City. This is what I'm not quite, remember Jesus himself took all the money he earned on his job in a bag and stayed homeless throughout his entire ministry. And the Bible says to be content with food and clothing. And the Bible says that God chose the poor of this world that are rich in grace. So nowadays, even people that call themselves Christians,
Idolize the greedy.
they're idolizing the greedy, yes, and idolizing greedy policies, as well.
Yeah.
And I think that people do not feel a sense of helping people in need. And just like we said with the other things, because society is in deterioration, people have some validations for this, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because I have spent the last decade or two trying to help homeless people, right? And when you do, I've had all kinds of people that just call me asking for money because they know that I've helped somebody. They're not trying to friend you. And a lot of them do drugs. And so it's like here in Concord, you have the Friendly Kitchen, which feeds anybody, no questions asked, that wants food. And I think it's probably the greatest charity in Concord. And it's wonderful. I don't know the people that started or how they do it, but I'll give them the title of a saint for what they do. But unfortunately, these good people are also harming the community with good, wonderful, saintly intentions, because the people that go there, 60+% of them are drug addicts. So they
If
say
they get $20, they can spend it on
drugs and then go eat at the Friendly Kitchen, right? And so then what happens, you go help the homeless people, that you give them money, they spend it on drugs. There was this one guy that I saw that said, I just got out of jail and I need $20 for a bus ticket to go to Manchester. I then go to the store and I see him in the store, right? Then I see him again. There's a guy that's in Loudon Road that says this, and he wasn't in jail, and he's not going.
A month later, he's still trying to get a bus ticket.
So he approached me, and I heard a couple of my workers talking about the guy. So then I saw him last week, and I said, "Hey," I said, "I fell for this one last year, right?" and so a lot of the homeless people, they're not like when it was a Christian country. What would happen is if you see somebody that's homeless, you give them money, you help them, and then you invite them to your church. Then they come to church. You get this idea that they're redeemed. And then when they're redeemed, you help them get a job. Either if you're a business owner, you give them a job yourself, or if you know one in your church, someone needs help, you give them work there. And then there was this whole idea that if somebody was in need, that by you helping them, helps them out. So then today, the homeless people tend to take advantage of the people that are helping them, and they're not trying to get out of the situation because they're using the money that they get to fuel a self-destructive addiction. And then you got to say, okay, if you lose your desire to help people, though, it hurts you. As a human being, you have to be generous. Part of love is taking care of people, and you need to share what you have with other people.
Right.
But then society is rewarding greed, and then society is creating a lifestyle where it costs, 50, 60, 70,000 a year just to live. Then that also makes people more greedy. So you have, on the one hand, the poor people are not doing a thing to show gratitude for the help, and then surviving is way more difficult than it ever was before.
Mm-hmm.
So the average person isn't making enough money to manage a middle class lifestyle, and then when they go and give to the other people, they're just looking to take advantage of what they can. It's not a Christian society. People don't have the mindset of redemption. So then this has had the effect between the greed causing prices to go up and the poor people being addicted to drugs has created and by valuing career over family, has caused people to then think that the meaning in life comes from wealth because they're not getting it in their family, they're not getting it in work, so they're trying to get it through money, and then you have these social pressures. I've seen these videos on YouTube where these girls will say, "I don't want to date a guy that makes less than 200,000 a year," right? And so they're putting pressure on people to have money that you can only get from greed in order to be considered valuable in society. Whereas before 1967, a girl would love a man that took care of kids. They used to be the same among women. They said, you can tell a lot from a man by how he treats his mother.
Mm-hmm.
So then, if you like a girl, then you want to be good to your mother. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because the girl would judge you for that. And then they wanted to be around people that were virtuous. Whereas now, they want guys that are tall, good-looking, young, and rich. Well, guess what? Most people that are young are not rich. The average age of a new car buyer is 27, 28. It starts in the late 20s, okay? And it takes a while to get rich, and the median salary in the country is in the 60,000 range. Less than 10% or 15% of the people make over 100,000 a year, and less than 5% make over 200,000 a year in the richest country in the world. So if all the girls are saying you need somebody that's in the top, if you're in their 20s, if you're in dating age, the numbers get even worse. You know, like it might actually be 2% or one, be closer to 2% that make over 200,000 a year. So then we're putting social pressure on people having to be rich. We're not valuing virtue, goodness, happiness, and love. We're not trying to be redeemed, and we're not getting any happiness returns on the investment of helping the poor. So when you put it all together, it's creating a society that's fully greedy. So instead of actually looking at greed to be something that takes away from your character, that takes away from your life and makes you selfish, it's actually had the opposite effect since 1967. Okay, you almost answered this question without in the last one. How has our attitude on competitiveness changed since 1967?
Yeah, so again, competitiveness was viewed as a negative trait. Like, I think part of the difference too is like in the past it was more of a sense of community. Like they used to say, there's no I in team.
Mm-hmm.
We're all, not just on a sports team, but like in society in general, we're kind of all working together. So if I feel I gotta outdo you, then that's not really a cooperative spirit. Now I'm just focused on me. So that's the old attitude. The old attitude was, like we're gonna win World War II together. Like this is everybody's gonna have to work together to do this. Whereas in this newer attitude, it's what have I done, what can I do, and it's what I'm doing better than what somebody else did. Like my life only has significance if I'm outdoing somebody, is kind of the attitude now. Or take it in the Christian sense, the church was one body, and now, it's me and my faith, and what I believe, and what I believe doesn't have to, be subject to the truth.
Well, if you look at the fundamental theme of redemption is to become a new creature, and then the idea of Jesus died on the cross, Paul equates that for us, the equivalent is dying to self.
Right.
And so if we die to self, we live for Christ. But we don't. But then Jesus says, whatsoever you've done to the least of my brethren, you've done to me. So if I've died to myself, that means that this self is relevant no more. So then your glory is more important than my glory, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then if I try to compete with you, then I'm trying to, in essence, harm your glory.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
that all of the stuff, like if all the rules of etiquette and everything are all based on putting someone else's needs before your own.
Yep.
And so in the old days, I remember even when I was a kid, in the 80s, people would say to me, "You're too competitive."
Yeah.
And believe it or not, that was not a compliment. What's strange is if somebody, they probably wouldn't say too competitive now. They probably say competitive without the word too.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because we've exalted professional athletes in society, we've exalted entertainers, and they've had great success and esteem in society. We've exalted being competitive, along with what we mentioned on the previous lesson that goes with it is greed. And so now we're valuing or admiring people that benefit self more, whereas if you look in the 60s, before the church age ended, before 67, you would value somebody that was generous, kind, helping, saintly. Whereas now it's somebody that's greedy, competitive, and exalts themselves.
Right.
And so those same things, like I said, narcissism hasn't always been popular like it is now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like being selfish was not something that benefited you at all culturally. And now it's acceptable, it's the norm, and it's encouraged. Like if you say, like, people are encouraged, don't have kids when you're 20, you want to benefit yourself. Don't dedicate your life to your spouse, you want to make sure that you can take care of yourself. And they now refer to themselves as number one. They say you want to look out for number one. Number one means self, right? And people are encouraged on how to get rich, how to advance in their career, how to multiply their investments, and you don't hear a lot of instructions on what is the best way to impact the community or to save souls or to make someone else happy. You get a lot more advice on how to be more competitive than you do on how to be kind, outgoing, and generous. Whereas if you went back into the 60s, before the church age ended, the opposite was true. There was more, because everybody went to church and everybody was in a Christian world, you would get instructions every week on how to benefit other people, how to impact the community, and what to do. And whereas now it's a slow shift from a human perspective. It's, like I say, the church age is I was born after the church age ended, okay? But the church age itself has been over for like 57 years. So if you're younger than 57 years, whatever age you are feels like an eternity. But if you look at it from a historical perspective, 57 years is like a blink in the eye. It's not even a generation of people.
Mm-hmm.
My father's 82.
You're right.
He's older than the time of this massive change. So these things that we are talking about, I submit to you, are bigger social changes than I think have ever existed in the history of the human race. And they were predicted by Jesus on the Mount of Olives when he gave one of his, one of his last speeches that he gave. This prophecy was predicted. Now, I've been teaching this prophecy since the 90s, and I have yet to find anyone that's not in this room to really agree with it. So if you're watching the video, if you're wondering why are we going through such detail, is that I think because society, everybody it's a natural human thing to try to fit in with a group. And so people just look for things that validate the group. So I'm hoping that if you can hear the details that support the prophecy, if you happen to hear this video, it can help you to see that the prophecy is true. And I think there's also been a massive degree of changes since the 90s or when we first started teaching it. I think what seemed a little abstract, 25 years ago, I feel is blatantly obvious now. Okay. How has people's attitude on meekness changed since 1967?
Yeah, well, definitely people who were gentle, harmless, which we learned meekness means, were admired in the past. And I mean, it's just ridiculous to think of that in terms of politics now. But, you know, they say meekness isn't weakness. I think people now believe meekness is weakness, and that we need to stand up for our rights, put the other people in their place, get our fair share, and meekness is stupid.
Yeah, well, I do think that as a culture as a whole, traditionally, I think women did a much better job with meekness than men.
Sure.
And I think the women's movement that has progressed since 1967 has shamed women from meekness. I think they think that it's a bad thing, that they need to show what they're angry at, who they're PO'd at, who they don't like, and that we had this trend about 15 years ago of everybody wanting to talk about what they didn't like.
Right.
And I think that's led to this fear culture that we've had, and it does seem as though we're making a transition into a hate culture. And I don't know where it started, but I know it went from greed to fear, and now we're in the beginning of hatred, right? What happens is that you start off with greed, saying, I want all this money for myself, and then greed creates complications because people sue, people get divorced, you get competitiveness, and between the competition, everything else, it causes you to be afraid of everything that could hinder your greed. And then you get used to being afraid. Then you're saying, okay, well, then I'm afraid of this person, I'm afraid of this group, I'm afraid of that group. Then you manifest that enough, then it's, I hate this group, I hate that group, and I hate the other. And so then when you have the attitude of hatred and fear and greed, meekness doesn't do a good job at expressing hatred to another person. And but one thing that's true of meekness is when you see someone that's meek, you get a feeling that this is going to be a good person. This is going to be someone that cares about you. This is going to be someone that will love you. Someone that's meek is approachable. So like when we didn't have a fear of strangers, you actually wanted to talk to strangers. Well, it's much easier to talk to someone that's meek than someone that looks abrasive. And so basically, I think you're encouraged to be approachable, loving, and kind. And I think this is, I think that now that we've moved into this fear culture, we're not necessarily valuing approachability, where I don't think most people want to be approached. You know, I think a lot of people want to keep to themselves, and when they talk, they want to talk about things that they're dissatisfied with, things they're greedy about, or things that will exalt their self-image. And those, if those are the three subject matters that people are interested in, then meekness doesn't work on any of those three. Like, I can't be gentle and talk about people that I hate.
Right.
I can't be gentle and exalt my self-image, and I can't be gentle and demand money.
Right. Right.
And so our political divide, you mentioned the politicians, not only are politicians attacking each other, but people are looking for people that are angry and trying to support policies that will be demeaning and forcing other countries and other people to cave to our demands. And then also that's the right, then on the left, people are trying to force their values on other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not really trying to, in the political or government world, we're not using meekness as a tool of persuasion anymore.
Right.
And we're also not valuing it. And then women that are born gentle and feminine are almost now embarrassed by their God-given nature that makes them likable, and they're taught to be more assertive and more abrasive. And because society has convinced itself that being abrasive and successful in a career is the key to happiness, and because people's ideas of happiness were wrong, people thought what they feared would make them happy. They thought justifying themselves would be happy. They thought being abrasive would be happy. What's happened is that doing that long enough, you get, like, if you believe in the things that will make you happy that don't, after a while, you believe that strong enough, then you actually don't have any happiness left. It's sort of like the drunk in the bar, is that when they go to the bar, what they enjoy is the girl in the bar liking them, the friends that they get to see, and the camaraderie, right? But if they convince themselves it's just the alcohol, then eventually they'll get drunk by themselves, and then they'll die of alcohol poisoning and have heart disease and cancer and everything else the alcohol causes, because the alcohol itself had nothing to do with why they enjoyed going to the bar, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of like, you want the attention of your mother, she justifies your flaws. You know, the justifying the flaws isn't really the love. The love was her attention and caring about your need.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then if you just keep thinking long enough, that justification is what love is, and you lose sight that it was the actual emotion,
Right.
then you end up, if your wrong view of love causes you to not know what love is. And you know, the same thing I think has happened with meekness. So we're not excited about gentle people, we're not defending gentle people, we're not being kind to gentle people, and we're rewarding people that are arrogant, self-promoting, and greedy. And that, of course, has been a result of the time of the Gentiles having ended. Okay, now let's move on to the next one. Okay, how has people's attitude or understanding of happiness changed since 1967?
That's a little more obvious, and which then makes it a little harder to answer. But basically, I think that in the past it was understood that happiness came from people in your life, the goodness in the people in your life. Like, it's impossible to make yourself happy, but that when you take the connection with other people out of the equation, which is what we've done now, happiness is really just viewed as some sort of self-validation. See, I'm not dumb because I did this, or see, I went to this beautiful place, I got this beautiful house, got this beautiful car. These are all things that validate that I'm not bad, I'm not dumb, I'm not a failure. That as a source of happiness has replaced being loved by somebody or being able to love somebody.
Yes, I mean, the realization of virtue, I think, is the key to happiness. And a second to the thing that you mentioned, which is love, which is the most important thing. Like truly believing that you're loved is the greatest source of happiness. I don't mean to quote secular music. If you don't, it's probably not good, but I can't help it because I didn't become a Christian until I was 21. But if you take the Leonard Skinner song, which was after 67, it was in the early 70s, but The Simple Man,
Mm-hmm.
find a woman, you'll find love.
Yeah.
And don't forget there's someone up above.
Right.
As crazy as it sounds to use a vain analogy,
Right.
I actually think that this is correct.
Right.
You know what the song said.
Yeah. Yeah.
He said the love of the woman and the faith in God.
Yeah, that's the meaning in your life, really.
Right.
Yeah.
And so basically, if you go before 67, it was the love of your family, the love of your community, and your love of God was how people saw happiness. So they would view, like I've often said, the quality of your life is equated to the people that are in it. So if you have one person that loves you, it's a greater value than all of the luxuries that come from wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, I think people understood that virtue was love. Like somebody giving of themselves to you made you happy. Someone being generous to you made you happy. Kindness is what made it. Seeing kindness in people that you cared about made you happy. Seeing kindness in your community made you happy. Seeing positive things happen, seeing virtuous things happen, seeing goodness happen, experiencing it, realizing it, expressing it. Expressing your love makes you happy. So like when you see somebody that you love, if they make you feel comfortable to express your feelings, that creates happiness. Being able to say I love you makes you happy. Being able to admire someone makes you happy. Having someone that you feel comfortable being generous to makes you happy.
Yeah.
Okay, so then if you look at today, it's my team won the Super Bowl is what people think will make them happy.
Mm-hmm.
They think being validated that they didn't make a mistake makes them happy. They think that their political party winning, basically you could say, to quote Charlie Sheen, winning. Sorry. I think people think that winning is the key to happiness.
Yes.
As opposed to loving.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so if winning something really did make you happy, then that would mean that competition is the key to happiness. It would mean greed is the key to happiness. Mm-hmm. But it's actually overcoming self is what creates happiness. Mm-hmm. And feeling love and virtue in other people is what makes happiness. And the fellowship and respect that you get from others, the self-respect that you get from having integrity, and the giving of yourself to others, and the receiving of integrity and love and goodness and care from others is what creates happiness. Whereas I think this generation has been brought up talking about so many things to avoid that I don't know if most young people today think that just simply averting a problem is happiness. I don't know, because it seems like our world is obsessed with problems. Mm-hmm. I wonder, do the intelligent people think that God, that heaven is like a maze that you always get to win? You know?
Or do we just finally overcome all problems, and that's heaven?
Then you're sitting there with the IV in the bed where you don't have to work or do anything? I don't know. It's very bizarre how people view happiness, but I think they think winning is happiness, justifying themselves, convincing themselves that they're not so bad, which is the same thing as justification. I think people view happiness to be something that they can show off, which is also part of self-justification. I think when you actually think about it, I think instead of viewing virtue, love, and goodness to be happiness, I think people are viewing promoting their self-image to be happiness. Mm-hmm. So promoting the self-image includes winning. It includes bragging about an accomplishment. It includes financial success. It includes what you support being validated. It includes your opinion being validated. And the reality of that is wrong. And I think, initially, If you're around someone you love and they say something that's right, then you say, hey, you were right, you were good, right? And it was really that support was the happiness. It wasn't actually that you were right that made the happiness.
Right.
Whereas I think as society gets colder and colder, I think people are losing sight of that support emotion, and they're just focusing on, the words.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people believe now that self-validation is what happiness is, but what they don't realize is that they're not actually feeling happiness. And because no one's actually feeling happiness, they no longer have a contrast to trigger what they believe versus not. Like, whereas if you go back to that song I quoted earlier, the Beatles song, Can't Buy Me Love, they're contrasting what you get from money versus what you get from love. Whereas now, everybody's in agreement that promoting a self-image creates happiness, even though it's wrong. They don't have the contrast because we're not looking for virtue in other people. We're not looking for the admiration. I think when you're in any relationship with somebody, mutual admiration is something that creates a lot of happiness.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And a lot of people don't like to give compliments now,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't like to share personal experiences. Mm-hmm. So in order for me to admire you, you need to tell me about what you're doing during the day. I can put together the pieces of admiration myself, but
Right.
when you talk to somebody that's younger than 30, they don't talk about their day, they don't talk about what they care about, they don't talk about their family, they don't talk about their feelings, they don't ask you any questions about your life, they don't care about your day, and they're not interested in what you've accomplished. So then this kills happiness. The inability to have a meaningful conversation makes it impossible to be happy. So then the only thing left is talking about a problem and complaining about a problem and talking about things that you're dissatisfied with. And then that gets more complicated because we have this world of the internet. You listen to Christian pastor speak, he's going to be talking about a problem. You listen to a politician talk, they talk about a problem. You look at an infomercial telling you how to get rich, they're going to talk about problems. Everything is a problem. But if you were focused on happiness, you actually, like to get happiness, you'd want to believe that someone cares about how you feel about life. You would want someone to share the most important experiences of your life with you. This would be true not just in romantic relationships, but true with friends. Like happiness comes from mutual admiration, through selfless acts of kindness, through giving, through the expressing of feelings, through the action of feelings, through the actions of care. And these things come through people joining together, and you join together through communication. And I think, ironically, in this information age, we're not getting any communication. So there's not a facilitator of happiness
Mm-hmm.
in the way that people talk. We're having very dull conversations in the world because people refuse to talk about feelings and ask questions about others. So then, as a result of this, relationships are becoming transactional,
Mm-hmm.
and then people are looking at relationships as a status symbol, and so they're saying, I have this great girlfriend, or the girl says she has this rich guy, and they're saying, this makes me happy. But then if you're looking at a relationship from the perspective of what you're going to get to validate your image, then you've taken happiness out of the relationship. The old John Kennedy quote with the government, he says, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. That brilliance of that statement applies in everything. Ask not what your spouse can do for you, but what you can do for your spouse. If you want to be happy,
Mm-hmm.
it's what you're happiest in life around the people that you serve,
Mm-hmm.
not the people that serve you.
Right.
So the people that I like the most
Mm-hmm.
in my life are the people that I want to help the most, the people that I feel more generous around, the people that I want to make their lives better. It's not, don't get me wrong, if someone wants to validate me, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I personally don't get happiness from self-validation.
Mm-hmm. Right.
the Bible says, Jesus says more blessed. Blessed, when you look at the word in the Greek, it means happy. So that means that it's more happy to give than receive. We believe that in the church age. Now I think we think receiving or justifying is happiness. The Bible says, blessed are the meek. That means happy are the meek. Blessed are the poor in spirit. That means happy. Blessed are they that are persecuted for righteousness' sake. That means that if you care about somebody or something strong enough where you're willing to endure suffering for it, that in the end will make you happy. I think in a negative world, you think any setback is painful and uncomfortable, and nobody wants to do it. If you get out of your comfort zone and are kind to people in need, these things create happiness. So I don't think these things are being valued now. I think exalting a self-image, having a great title, and looking good on social media is what's valued, instead of the actual things that create happiness. And I'm going to look at these notes. See, because now I thought we'd be done with this week, but okay. Let's see what time it is. Yeah, we might be able to get. Actually, no, we'll ask this one question. How has a career become more important than Actually, not. We can look then. How is a career becoming more important than character or faith since 1967?
Well, kind of in line with the other things that we're saying here is that, our values have changed. The values of virtue, values of being loved, having someone to serve, used to be what was most important. Now, like, you're not going to have a good life if you don't get a good job. Kids are being taught you have to go to college, you have to maximize whatever talents you have in order to have a good life, not so much, find a girl and you'll find love. If you find what you're best at, what you're the highest value talent that you have, as opposed to finding the person that you're meant to be with for life.
Well, see, in the past, not that everyone chose the narrow road, because it was still the narrow road, but people understood the idea of a hidden gem, the pearl of great price, and the mystery thing. So I think in the past, if you knew somebody had good character, then you valued that person tremendously, and you understood that having someone in your life that had good character was of great importance. And now people would put the title of their career to be the most important, to a degree. I mean, the character can't be so bad that they commit crimes, right?
Right.
But there's a fundamental change in how people gather information since the church age, okay? Is that during the church age, people subjected their thoughts to their understanding of Scripture and to God. And then the early part of the church age, people did this to a watered-down version of God. But what's happened now is that people, because they're trying to exalt a self-image, people are subjecting their thoughts to what they perceive to be popular in whichever social circle they've identified with. And then as a result of that, character and faith doesn't matter, which, like if you look at the country as a whole, like if you take the Christians supporting Trump, that you had by the church standards, Mike Pence, a guy, his vice president, that was a active Christian member for 30, 40, maybe perhaps his whole life. I don't actually know his history, but he now to this day is teaching the Bible in a Christian college. And then they put up gallows because he went against the guy that went bankrupt 6 times, that extorts money from people, that's cheated on his wife, that never went to church, that doesn't tithe, right? So what's interesting is the guy, Mike Pence, he didn't show any argument, he didn't show any anger, he behaved as, at least from a secular perspective, a Christian man.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that him taking the high ground got rewarded by the Christian community.
No.
And I feel as though in the past it would have. Like in the past, somebody would have noticed and said, hey, this is a Christian, at least in the Christian world. I'm not talking about the non-Christian world. Like if you're a Trump supporter and you're not a Christian, then if you actually believe, the story, then that would make sense.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're actually a Christian, then you say, hey, my Christian guy that's there, is doing, well, I don't know how you can believe the story, even if you're not a Christian, but needless to say, we're not rewarding character. So like in the real world, if, like I say, people, when you see them interviewing a girl or someone wanting to date somebody, when a girl says she wants to date someone, she wants to date someone that's over 6 feet tall, that makes over $200,000 a year, somebody that's okay with them having a career, someone that has hobbies of their own, someone that's totally independent. Okay, does this speak of character? Okay, now if we go in the past, people say, I want someone that's in my church, someone that has a love of God, someone that's good to their parents, someone that would be a good father, and someone that cares about me. Which one of those two descriptions includes character and faith?
Yeah, the older one.
Right. So we've become a very shallow society since 1967. And so then if the things that you are looking for are shallow, where the Bible says as you sow, so shall you reap. Mm-hmm. So if we're not sowing character, then we're not reaping character. If we're not sowing faith, we're not reaping faith. So if the things that we're looking for to create a relationship don't have any depth to them, then you end up losing things like character, selfless, and meekness. And I think also it brings us to a point where people don't crave relationships as much because they're not valuing the things that actually make relationships work.
Mm-hmm.
So on that note, we will close this week. So dear God, I pray that if anyone that happens to watch this video actually gets to see the prophecy, has a desire to be part of the remnant and help join us in this cause of rebuilding faith and rebuilding your church, in Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen.